The Pittsburgh Steelers finished the 2024 season with a 10-7 record and made the playoffs for the fourth time in the last 5 years. And unfortunately, for the fourth time in the last 5 years, this team was eliminated in the wildcard round of the playoffs, this time by the Baltimore Ravens, with a score of 28-14.
Back. Meanwhile, there goes Henry. There goes Henry all the way for the touchdown.
And the 2024 season for the Steelers was a good representation of what the past several years largely have been for this franchise. They started out hot as they were 3-0 with wins over the Falcons, Broncos, and Chargers, and looked like their defense was going to be a legitimate problem for the rest of the NFL, as in those first 3 games, they forced 5 turnovers and allowed just 26 total points in 3 games. And they were eventually 10-3 through 13 games, which included wins over teams like the Washington Commanders on the road and the Baltimore Ravens. But eventually it all came crashing down as they lost to the Eagles in Week 15 with a score of 27-13, and it only got worse from there. They went from 10-3 to 10-7 and were outscored 109-57 in the final 4 games of the regular season. And if you want to include the playoff game against Baltimore, then that jumps up to 137-71. It was a disappointing end to the Steelers for their franchise, but there were a lot of questions at the end of last year. How can we get over the hump? How can we get back to competing and winning big games? Is Mike Tomlin the long-term answer at head coach? And how can we win our first playoff game since 2016? And needless to say, there are a lot of questions for the 2025 Pittsburgh Steelers. But how will they do this year? Well, we're going to break everything down in today's video. Before we start, if you could like the video, I would really appreciate it, and without further ado, let's begin. And we are starting today's video by discussing who the Steelers brought in and who they lost this offseason. The Steelers were a very active team this offseason, and perhaps no move was bigger for them than bringing a quarterback in free agency in Mason Rudolph. But in all seriousness, the biggest move was, of course, bringing in future Hall of Fame quarterback Aaron Rodgers. And it's pretty clear Rodgers is one of the best quarterbacks ever. He has over 500 career passing touchdowns, he's a 4-time league MVP winner, he's a Super Bowl champion, and when he was in his prime, there were very few quarterbacks feared the way a prime Aaron Rodgers was. And we'll of course break down Aaron Rodgers a lot more during the offensive portion of the video, but he is without a doubt the most notable acquisition the Steelers had this offseason, and rightfully so. From a free agency standpoint, they also brought in Darius Slay on a 1-year deal. Big play Slay is 34 and will turn 35 late in the 2025 season, and while he certainly has lost a step from the player he was in his prime, he was not a bad player in 2024, and based on what the Steelers' goal in 2025, which is pretty clearly a 1 year for the rest of our lives mentality, he is a fine signing for the Steelers. And not only that, but he is a great locker room guy, and I don't want to attribute the rise of Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean in their rookie year solely to Darius Slay, as that would be extremely unfair to both of those players and their work ethics and ability, but Darius Slay is a valuable locker room asset to have, in addition to being a solid player at this point in his career. They also brought in safety Juan Thornhill from the Browns to help out the secondary, and while Thornhill is not a household name, nor is he one of the best safeties in the league, I thought this was a good value for the Steelers to bring him in on a 1-year, $3 million deal. Now, for what you are probably waiting for regarding their offseason moves, the Steelers were a very active team this year in the trade market, and these weren't your little 5th-string corner trades in late August for a late pick swap 2 years from now. The Steelers traded a 2nd-round pick and a 7th-round pick to the Seahawks for wide receiver DK Metcalf and a 6th-round pick. Now, one common thing that gets misunderstood regarding the DK Metcalf trade is he did not sign a 5-year, $150 million contract extension with the Steelers. He was already under contract, and the amount of years he is under contract equates to 5 for $150, but he actually signed a 4-year, $132 million contract extension for an average annual value of $33 million. There was a belief for about 2 months that DK Metcalf and George Pickens were going to be a very fun duo to watch, and the jokes were tossed around about what would happen if one player wasn't getting the ball enough to their satisfaction, and that was definitely fun to think about in March and April when they were still teammates. But as we know, the Steelers traded George Pickens to the Cowboys in May after the 2025 draft for a 2026 third as well as a 2027 5th and 6th pick swap. And for clarity, the Steelers got the higher of the 2 picks here between them and the Cowboys, meaning they received the 2027 5th. Then at the end of June, the Steelers traded for corner Jalen Ramsey and tight end Jonnu Smith in exchange for Minkah Fitzpatrick and a 2027 5th round pick. This was initially reported by Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport as separate trades, meaning it was Ramsey for Minka straight up and the Jonnu trade was separate, but anyways, the point is, the Steelers brought in Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith via a trade with the Dolphins. In free agency, they lost former left tackle Dan Moore Jr., who signed with the Titans, quarterbacks Justin Fields and Russell Wilson as they signed with the Jets and Giants, and former interior offensive lineman James Daniels, who signed with the Dolphins. Overall, this was a very active offseason for the Steelers, who, at least based on every move they made this offseason, believe they are very close to competing for a Super Bowl. And today's video is sponsored by PrizePicks and my code GFB, and the Pittsburgh Steelers season opener is only a couple of days away against the New York Jets, and I have my pick'ems for this weekend along with the season-long sponsor of the channel, PrizePicks. And with it being the Steelers season opener, that obviously means it's Aaron Rodgers' Steelers debut, so I like Aaron Rodgers more than passing yards in week 1 against the Jets, but not only is it Aaron Rodgers' Steelers debut, but it's also DK Metcalf's Steelers debut, and I think they're going to make it a priority to get him the football early and often, so I also like DK Metcalf's more than receiving yards in week 1 too. Justin Fields is also playing against his former team in the Pittsburgh Steelers, but I really like the Steelers defense, and that's why we're going lower on Justin Fields' passing yards. Now, the Jets did invest a lot of draft capital in second-round tight end Mason Taylor, and I think Mason Taylor will receive quite a few targets, especially in week 1 to get him going in the offense, and that's why I'm going more than Mason Taylor's receiving yards in week 1 against the Steelers. And the biggest thing is football is back, so use my code GFB when you download the PrizePicks app, link below, make your first $5 deposit, and PrizePicks will give you $50 in lineups instantly. Also, the Dak Prescott Max Week 1 discount is good until game day, so you can sign up for PrizePicks and use code GFB and have Dak Prescott half a yard for Week 1. That's Dak Prescott to throw for half a yard when you sign up using code GFB, and we're trying to get 100 signups by the end of September, so you can sign up for PrizePicks, use code GFB, make your first $5 deposit, and get $50 in lineups instantly. And a big thank you to PrizePicks for sponsoring today's video. Now, with the Steelers' defense entering 2025, this is a unit that's led by Terrell Austin, who has been the team's defensive coordinator since the start of the 2022 season. This is a very good defense, and one that finished 8th in defensive DVOA last year, as well as 10th in defensive EPA per play. They are led by 2021 DPOY TJ Watt, who has finished in the top 4 of Defensive Player of the Year voting in every year since 2019, with the exception of 2022, in which he only played 10 games. TJ Watt is without a doubt one of the best players in football. He has over 100 career sacks, he's a 7-time Pro Bowler, and is a 4-time first-team All-Pro. He will be a Hall of Famer one day, but this defense is not just TJ Watt and everyone else. The Steelers' front 7 is amongst the best in football, as they also have Cam Hayward, Alex Highsmith, who may go down as one of the more underappreciated players from this era, Keanu Benton, Nick Herbig, Patrick Queen, and Peyton Wilson. And we talk about pressures on the channel regularly and how that affects opposing quarterbacks, and it obviously does, and Alex Highsmith is a good example of this. Highsmith has just 13 sacks over the last 2 years, and he did miss some time in 2024, but he is a menace on the field and is a great Robin to TJ Watt's Batman. Both players had north of 65 pressures in 2023 and would have had 50 pressures last year if Highsmith had not missed 6 games, meaning both players would have had 50, but even despite missing 6 games, Highsmith still had 48 pressures in 11 games, which is very good. And throughout the team preview series, we've emphasized how important a front 4 is and getting after the quarterback, and the Steelers perfectly exemplify this. Having to play TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, and Cam Hayward isn't fun for anyone, especially when all 3 can and regularly do get after the quarterback, and all 3 of these players have the ability to generate 50-plus pressures in a season, and while the Steelers may have collapsed over the past few years, and seemingly at the worst of times, it usually was not due to their defense. 2024 was an exception, as they allowed 299 rushing yards to the Ravens in the wildcard round, but scoring an average of just 14.2 points per game in your final 5 games of the year was always going to be the bigger problem. And you can't expect to beat the Lamars, Allens, Mahomes, and Burrows of the world putting up 14 points with your season on the line. But my point is, the Steelers are not a slouch defensively, and they also finished first in turnovers last year, as they forced 33 turnovers in 17 games. They had a plus 16 turnover margin and forced a turnover in 14 of the 17 games they played. And what I believe their philosophy this year defensively is going to be is pretty simple. Place a substantial emphasis on stopping the run early so that we can have everyone get after the quarterback on 3rd and 8+, and have our corners in Joey Porter Jr., Jalen Ramsey, and Darius Slay play man-to-man and force the offense into a bad situation. And what should also be noted with the 2024 Steelers is they finished 5th in average yards per carry against last year. Obviously, the Ravens playoff game was a terrible ending to the season, but their run defense was not like that for most of the year, and it is also unfortunate the Ravens are the best team in the division and are also a bad matchup specifically for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But as long as this unit stays healthy, and as long as Patrick Queen and Peyton Wilson play good against the run, and Keanu Benton continues to develop in year 3, which could be a breakout year for him, I have a hard time thinking this is going to be a bad unit this year. The biggest thing for them that unfortunately happened down the stretch of the 24 season is they can't beat themselves. We don't know how injuries are going to play out, and every team only has so many good corners, so you can do the hypothetical of if a corner goes down, they're screwed, but I think that applies to most teams. But for the sake of the 25 Steelers preview, the defense is very good, and their clear goal is to stop the run on early downs and to get after the quarterback. The Pittsburgh Steelers' rookie impact is a wild card heading into 2025, though I am more optimistic than pessimistic for a couple of reasons. Now, Derek Harmon did sprain his MCL in a preseason game. I'm not going to pretend like I know how that injury is healing and whether or not he's going to be a true 100% in week 1 or week 2, or whether he's going to be 100% by week 4 or 5, but whenever he is healthy, assuming he gets back to full health at some point during the 25 season, this is a situation I like a lot for him personally to succeed in, especially with, this also has to be assumed that Cam Hayward is going to come back at some point, because when you look at this situation of Derek Harmon, Cam Hayward, Keanu Benton, and then of course both guys on the outside and TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, this is a dream situation for Derek Harmon to walk into as a rookie. Now, I will be honest that I was not the biggest Derek Harmon fan in the pre-draft process, but in terms of the situation he is entering, this is as home run of a pick as you're going to find, or as home run of a landing spot as you're going to find. And one of the biggest reasons that I was not a Derek Harmon fan in the pre-draft process, because I don't want to gloss over that and then not address it pertaining to the team's rookie impact, is because I thought he was a little tight in the hips pertaining to the ability to get off blocks in the run game, and he also missed over 25% of his tackles during his final year at Oregon, and unfortunately that's not a made-up stat, but if there's going to be a team that's going to be able to maximize his production, I firmly believe it's going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not just because Cam Hayward's there and he's going to be able to teach him everything, but situationally, this is as good as it gets, and there's going to be plenty of opportunity for Derek Harmon to be able to pin his ears back on 3rd and 6 and be able to get after Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and any of the other elite quarterbacks that the Steelers face in this conference. Now, because Derek Harmon is a defensive lineman and he's going to be battling for sacks with, TJ Watt and Cam Hayward and Alex Highsmith, I don't think the production you're going to see from him in 2025 specifically is going to be all that much on the stat sheet, and that actually has nothing to do with the sprained MCL, whether he plays 17 games or 15 or 14 games. That has nothing to do with that. I would have said that with or without the MCL sprain, but I think a good 2025 season for Derek Harmon would be consistently applying pressure, up the middle and to be able to push the pocket and to be able to force Lamar Jackson or Joe Burrow to either go back out of the pocket or to be able to step up into the pocket. That way TJ or Alex can come crashing in for the sack and to be able to play complementary football from a pass rush standpoint. So I think a good season for Derek Harmon this year would be something along the lines of 30 or 35 pressures with 3.5 to 4 sacks. And that would be a really good season for a round 1 defensive lineman in year 1. One of the reasons as to why the Steelers' rookie impact is so hard to project for 2025 is because you have a defensive lineman in round 1, and their second round pick was obviously used in the DK Metcalf trade, and you don't know how Derek Harmon is going to play off the sprained MCL, and not only that, but interior defensive line for rookies specifically is usually not a productive position. So naturally, there's going to be a little bit of a ceiling from their first round pick this year, unless he has an Aaron Donald type rookie year or just an insane rookie season that nobody sees coming. So that's going to put a little bit of a ceiling, at least from their first round pick. And like we said, the second round selection was used to trade for DK Metcalf. But why I really thought the Steelers redeemed themselves after the Derek Harmon selection in the 25 draft, and why I became a fan of the draft, draft was because this was a meat and potatoes class for the Steelers in the best way possible. I had Derek Harmon at player 38 on my big board. They selected him at player 21, but I had Caleb Johnson, the Steelers' third-round selection, whom they took at player 81, at player 39 on my big board. Very rarely did it work out like that, where a team went back-to-back in terms of the players I had ranked on my big board, but I thought Caleb Johnson was one of the bigger draft steals in the 2025 draft, and this is a player who should be a really productive player in the NFL. He has a lot of transferable qualities from the collegiate level to the NFL, and one of the biggest things is both his vision and his IQ. Now, whenever you complement a player's vision and or IQ, typically that means that they are not the best athlete, and that's kind of a cop-out, if you will. Well, he's not the best, but he has a really high IQ, and he's a really good anticipator of the game. And while Caleb Johnson's speed will not be confused with Devon Achane, he is a good enough football player, and I think he's going to be a player that Steelers fans grow to love over the course of his career. He had over 1,500 yards during his final season at Iowa. He had over 20 rushing touchdowns during his final season at Iowa, and per Pro Football Focus, he forced over 65 missed tackles in 2024 alone. The only difficult part to project for Steelers fans, and ultimately the projection of their 2025 rookie class impact here, is how much is he going to play and how many carries is he going to split with Jaylen Warren. But the bottom line is, for 2026 and beyond, I think the Steelers have their future running back won. I just would not feel comfortable projecting a 2025 season for Caleb Johnson, because if I say, hey, he's going to take over the running back position by week 3, he's going to run for 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns this year, and he's going to be the steal in your fantasy draft, there's a very real scenario where he doesn't, and that him and Jaylen Warren split carries, because the Steelers want to protect both players so that they are healthy by the time December and January rolls around. But in terms of a true impact and in terms of being a good football player, I think the Steelers undoubtedly have one in running back Caleb Johnson. Their third selection was at pick 123, which is Ohio State edge Jack Sawyer, and I like Jack Sawyer a lot for who he is as a player. He's a high motor guy that can come in and rush the passer in specific situations, but you go back to the team's depth chart and look at Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt and ask the question, is Jack Sawyer going to replace either of those guys in year 1? And the answer is a definitive no, barring injury, of course. Now, I think he will come in and play in pass rush specific situations whenever they want to have a more edge-centric package, and whenever we can have a situation where we have TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Jack Sawyer, and Cam Hayward all on the field at the same time, but naturally his production is going to be limited. I want to note that I really like the selection of Y.A. Black, a defensive tackle from Iowa, but again, there's several players in front of him on the depth chart, so specifically for today's video, a 2025 Steelers team preview, the rookie production is pretty much going to be limited to both Derek Harmon and Caleb Johnson. I also like the selection of Will Howard as a developmental backup quarterback, but again, Steelers fans, you guys know that I'm saying this in the nicest way that I possibly can. We don't want Will Howard on the field in 2025 unless we're up 35-0 late in the game and he's taking snaps to run out the clock, because they signed Aaron Rodgers for a reason, and you do not want him to play over Aaron Rodgers due to either injury or poor play, resulting in Will Howard to come into the game to begin with. So because of all of this is why the Steelers rookie production is in a lot of ways going to be limited to both Derek Harmon and Caleb Johnson. You're not going to believe this, but between the time that I recorded the Caleb Johnson rookie impact part and now the Steelers offense portion of the video, the Steelers and running back Jaylen Warren agreed to a 2-year extension. So how that's going to play out now, at least how I project it'll play out in 2025, is kind of what we mentioned towards the end of the rookie impact, is that they're going to have more of a 50-50 or maybe even more of a 60-40 split between Warren and Johnson, and that each player is going to be utilized within the offense. And if you are wondering from a fantasy perspective, I would probably not draft either player because of the prioritization of each player within the offense, and I would be pretty surprised if either player has more than 20 carries in a game twice in the 2025 regular season, simply because it makes a lot more sense from an analytical standpoint to not have either Jaylen Warren or Caleb Johnson, despite Caleb being a 220-plus pound back, to have 300 touches by the time January rolls around. And obviously that comes back to the diminishing returns, and whenever Caleb Johnson would be on his 335th touch of the season in January 18th in the divisional round of the playoffs, you get the point of what I'm saying here regarding the running back position for the Steelers offense in 2025. So I do think it will be a split backfield, and that we could very easily see the Steelers have 2 running backs have 750 rushing yards this year, and I really do like the idea of Jaylen Warren and Caleb Johnson in this offense. Where I have concerns with the Pittsburgh Steelers offense is the receivers outside of DK Metcalf. Now, with offensive coordinator Arthur Smith, we're obviously going to have tight ends a lot more involved, and I do believe that Pat Freiermuth is underrated heading into the year. I think people kind of just forget about Freiermuth and forget the fact that he's a pretty consistent player, all things considered, and then that the Steelers also traded for Jonnu Smith, who Arthur Smith has loved ever since he's been an offensive coordinator in the NFL, and people kind of just assume that Freiermuth, despite signing a pretty hefty contract extension for the tight end position, is just going to be phased out of the offense, and I don't think that's going to be the case either. But even with this team running a lot more 12 personnel, 1 running back, 2 tight ends, 12 personnel, 13 personnel would be 1 running back, 3 tight ends, you get the point. I still have concerns with the receiver position outside of DK Metcalf. I liked the idea of Calvin Austin as a wide receiver 3 when the Steelers drafted him a couple of years ago, but for him to have this increased role and to expect him to come in and to have a 70 or 75 reception with 800 yards as a wide receiver 2, to me is not the player that Calvin Austin is going to be in 2025, and I think that's a giant leap of faith of where the Steelers would want him to be, and ultimately I don't think that's the player that he's going to be this year. Now, with Roman Wilson, this was a receiver I liked a lot coming out of Michigan, but now that we have a different offense with Arthur Smith here, and the fact that he did not play much at all during his rookie season, it's very much going to be, I have to see it from Roman Wilson to believe it. Not to say that he can, of course, but I'm not as confident with Roman Wilson entering 2025 as I was with him just 1 year ago. I hope Roman Wilson proves me wrong, and again, I really did like him coming out of Michigan, but with the Steelers receivers outside of DK Metcalf, I do think if somebody is going to step up in the 25 season, if I had to choose, that player would be Roman Wilson. Now, one big point of discussion with the 2025 Steelers offense is going to be the offensive line. I am a very big Zach Frazier fan. I'm also a big Troy Fautanu fan. Loved him coming out of Washington and also loved Frazier coming out of West Virginia last year. And I do think the Steelers have at least 2 of the 5 spots along the offensive line secured. But there's an old saying that basically says, you are only as good as your weakest link. And I will be honest, I have a lot of concerns with Broderick Jones going from right tackle to left tackle, and a player that allowed over 40 pressures at right tackle last year, although some of those pressures can definitely be attributed to Russ hanging onto the football quite a bit, and even Justin Fields when he played for that matter, but also allowing 10 sacks. And I don't like this belief of, well, Broderick Jones played left tackle more at Georgia, and he's naturally going to flip a switch at the NFL level, going from right tackle back to left tackle, and that he's going to become a good player. And I think that that is definitely worth noting and worth mentioning as we head into the 2025 season. And one other thing that we have to mention with Arthur Smith is his love for the tight end position, and how much is he going to help Broderick Jones out at left tackle? Is Darnell Washington going to come in and effectively be a 6th offensive lineman on those deep, long, developing passing plays where Arthur wants to run either a Dino concept or a Yankee concept and basically say, hey Aaron, we want you to throw the ball deep to DK Metcalf here, but we know pass protection may struggle to hold up this long, so Darnell, come in and please be the 6th offensive lineman. And those specific situations are going to be what I'm paying attention to with the Steelers in 2025. This was a team last year that finished around the 18th to 19th area in both passing and rushing DVOA, so it's not like they were definitively strong in one area, and that's going to be one of the biggest factors within the 2025 Steelers offense as to why I think their ceiling is pretty limited. Now, for the man that is under center for the Steelers in 2025 in 4-time league MVP and future Hall of Famer Aaron Rodgers. This is a player that threw 28 touchdowns to 11 interceptions last year with the New York Jets, and if you are a Steelers fan buying in, saying, hey, we brought in Aaron Rodgers, we brought in Jonnu Smith, we brought in Jalen Ramsey, we brought in DK Metcalf, we are going all in for 1 year for the rest of our lives. You can very easily convince yourself with that discussion. But what I will say about Aaron Rodgers and the player that he was in 2024, there were times last year where I don't want to say he was a check down Charlie, because that's not what I'm saying, but there were certainly times last year where he was 40 years old and he certainly played like it, and I don't think that that's going to change at 41 going on 42, as Aaron will turn 42 in the month of December. So there's going to be times this year, positively, where he turns the clock back, he probably hits DK Metcalf on a 65 or 70 yard play. Steelers fans have the adrenaline flowing through them like it's 2008 with Ben DeSantonio, and it's going to be one hell of a moment, and I'll be happy for Steelers fans when that moment happens for them. But one thing that I do want to hammer home with Aaron Rodgers is you are not getting a 2014 or 2015 Aaron Rodgers, and I'll be honest, as a Vikings fan, I don't miss watching that player play against my team, because that man installed a lot of fear in me growing up. I know how good he is. He's one of the best players ever, and forget the GOAT discussion with Tom having 7 rings and all of that. If you want to say, in terms of the most pure talented passer ever, there's a discussion to be had with Aaron Rodgers in his prime. But the biggest thing is Aaron Rodgers is not in his prime anymore, and that's what has to be remembered pertaining to the 2025 Steelers, and what also has to be remembered pertaining to the 25 Steelers, and why I think they have a lower ceiling than Steelers fans would probably like to admit, is there's a lot of questions around the offensive line, and whenever you have a 41 going on 42-year-old quarterback with questions around the offensive line, and certainly questions at receiver outside of DK Metcalf, guys, unless the defense just comes out and plays like the 85 Bears or the 2000s Ravens or even the Steel Curtain back in the 1970s, I think this team's ceiling is going to be at maximum a divisional round exit. I wouldn't put it past Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers winning one road playoff game in the wild card round, because I do think the Baltimore Ravens are going to win the AFC North for the 3rd straight year, but I certainly don't trust this team to go into Buffalo, Kansas City, and Baltimore 3 times in a row in a gauntlet and beat all of those teams en route to Super Bowl 60 to play for it all in San Francisco in the 2nd week of February. But I think their team ceiling is going to be a divisional round exit, and that will wrap up the 2025 NFL Team Preview Series. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe, as I truly cannot thank you guys enough for the support. And guys, this was a long process. It started all the way back in late May. We actually picked up more subscribers on the channel in July than we did in February, despite it being not football season at all. So shout out to you guys for consistently watching and liking the video and subscribing, and I hope you guys enjoyed the videos as much as I enjoyed making them. And as always, until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.